Welcome to another episode of the Sheer Growth Podcast. And today I'm joined by Jim Harenchar, CEO of Response Marketing Group, a data-driven marketing and analytics firm focused on turning deep customer insights into measurable growth. And RMG has built its reputation on segmentation, predictive modeling, attribution, and performance accountability, helping brands understand not just who their customers are, but how to engage them more intelligently. So Jim, welcome to the episode. Great to have you on board. Maybe you could tell our audience a little bit more about you, the origin, and what led you to build Response Marketing Group around the niche that you're currently in.
Yeah, sure. Well, first off, James, thank you. Good to join you this morning. I came to RMG when it was about 8 years old. So in October, we will be 40 years old, and that's worth celebrating. So we're very proud of that. It started at a time when there were only two direct-to-consumer marketing channels. So telemarketing, which everybody hated because the phone rang in the middle of your dinner. And at least in my household, my dad said, nobody's answering that phone. So that was one of the two. And then direct mail was the other. And our value proposition back in those kind of late 80s, 90s was in working with clients that were focused on acquisition, retention, cross-selling of products and services. A dominant percentage of our client base was out of the financial services industry. Primarily, James, because they were some of the first to really recognize the power of data analytics and predictive modeling. And so our differentiator was if you were a financial services company and you were launching a product or a service, let's say you were going to sell debit cards or you were going to sell equity lines and loans of credit, what better way than to identify who your good customer was in your existing customer base and then build a lookalike or a clone model off of that based on exposing those folks to a variety of demographics. So, within financial services, a lot of the predictiveness or a lot of the likeliness of response is going to be based on your biggest demographics, age, income, presence of children, home value, those types of things. But inevitably, we would have a campaign that we would run where one of the psychographic data points would pop up and you'd be like, gosh, that is just odd. And so I think of one. We had a client, very well-known national banking institution here in the U.S. that was looking at launching a line of credit, and we expose audiences, and we still do this today. So really hasn't changed over the years. We expose the audience to over 350 demographics, and behind age, income, and presence of children, the number one likelihood of response within the model was owned an SUV. And there was a 72% likelihood that a person that owned a SUV was more likely than someone that did not to respond. And so that was really an oddity for us, but a great example of you don't know what may end up ultimately being a differentiator. And so we have, fast forward from 1986 to 2026, retained that focus on data and analytics as the underpinning for what we do. Now, we're well beyond two channels. Now, I don't even know how many we have now, right? When you count as an influencer, count as a channel, I don't know, but we've got, let's just say, dozens of channels that marketers can choose from. And so for us, we have never been invested on the media side of it. So I don't really care what channel our clients use to drive awareness and to do their acquisition, retention, and cross-selling. But we feel like our role is to help make sure that response attribution is one of the key metrics that are constantly in place so that folks can understand how we measure return on investment, how do we measure return on ad spend, so that we can make your marketing more effective. It's targeted, our response rates are up, and your costs per acquisition are down.
That's a great summary of the business and also the journey that you've been through. 40 years, that's incredible. And congratulations on achieving that
Thank you.
milestone.
Thank you.
Not many
Yeah.
agencies last that long, apart from some of obviously the huge ones that we
The
all
huge
know.
ones, right.
Yeah,
Right.
the ones
And
that we
even
know.
they've changed.
Yeah, completely. On that then, how has the mission evolved as the marketing landscape has become more tech-driven?
Well, I think that what we have found is we have clients that are on a broad spectrum of sophistication from a marketing perspective. So we have some folks, and I don't say this in any way denigrating their strengths or their skill sets, but we have some that would define themselves as less sophisticated or unsophisticated. They may not have a big formal CRM. They don't have the budget to invest in a Salesforce or a HubSpot or whatever type of infrastructure. but they are marketers and they are looking to grow, and revenue is the driving focus. And then we've got very sophisticated clients that have all of those capabilities. And so when you're spanning a broad waterfront of sophistication of clients, obviously some folks are much more attuned to, hey, we've got the data. We understand how to build models. We're looking for a unique advantage. How can you help us? And we have others that are a little bit of crawl, walk, run, right? So they're still in the stage of, yeah, we get it. We'd love to collect data, but I don't have a place to put them. So without a formal CRM, can I still do marketing? Can I still capture customer information? Can I still expose my past buyers to some amount of data to enhance my response rates? And the answer to that is obviously yes. So we work with a very broad array of clients. And so at the end of the day, that doesn't change what the outcome goal is, right? We still want to understand how we tie response attribution to the campaigns that we're running, regardless of the channel, regardless of the budget that you have to spend. I always like to say, James, that every client has a finite budget. Right. So a small mom and pop store that sells dog toys might have a smaller budget than GE. But the reality is it's finite for both of them, right? It's just a different number. There's more zeros in there. And so budgets being precious and being finite, you still need to be able to understand how we can measure our.
Yeah, completely. It's the most important, right? Getting that return on investment. That's what people judge and monitor things on. So, if you had to summarize what RMG does better than anyone else, what would that be?
Well, I think first and foremost, because we don't buy any media. So, if you are a fan and you find that Meta generates the best response for you, then we think that you ought to heavy up on Meta. If you and we still have some clients, believe it or not, James, that still do this. We still have some direct mail clients. It's a small portion of what it was back in 1988, but we still have folks where direct mail is as effective as any other channel. And so for us, I think we approach a project by saying that we have a shared outcome goal, we and our clients, and that is to help make whatever dollars that they're spending as accountable and as effective as we possibly can. And so if you take the fact that I am not a media buyer, so I'm not going to push you in any direction. And I don't yes, we have creative resources, but I'm not an ad agency. So for me, it's not about, the pretty picture or the next big ad. I'm going to take whatever assets the client has. In some cases, will help clients with the creative and development side. And then we're going to help them identify who is the audience for which this is most attuned. And so an oversimplistic example, we do a lot of work in the tourism industry. So logically, if I am a boutique hotel and I am looking to promote and build awareness, and I'd like to offer a promotional rate in the marketplace. If I offer a promotional rate to everybody and the audience with two kids under 10 can't really take advantage of that Wednesday and Thursday night promotion because their kids are in school. They can come on a weekend or they might be able to come in the summer. But the fact that I know they are a family with two kids under the age of 10 versus an empty nester over 65, retired, who can take advantage of that promotional offer. Logic would dictate, let's send the targeted audience to the most receptive household, and thus will generate a greater response, whether that's a click through, whether that's an actual booking. But we'll be able to, as my dad always used to say, give the dog the type of dog food you'll eat. Let's make sure that we're targeting the most relevant audience as opposed to kind of a spray and pray mentality and say that we got clicks and opens, so it's a successful campaign. Well, not really. At the end of the day, if your goal is to drive bookings and to drive occupancy, then we need to make sure that we're targeting the audience that's going to respond and book.
Yeah, I think that's a real good overview of what it takes really from understanding the client's expectations and the delivery and having that unique, not unique proposition, but same outcome at the end of it. That's what they lean into an agency for. And one of the things that you mentioned was you've got a wide variety of clients and you've been going for 40 years now. So you must be doing something right to be able to be going for this period of time. And you mentioned, offline, you spoke about the companies at different iterations. What I'm interested to know is with a business 40 years on, how is your growth structured? How do you build your company? The clients that you work with, they come from referrals? Do you have an outbound mechanism? How does that structure work in your organization?
Yeah, great question. So we are a small, what I would call a small analytic and strategic boutique. And so we don't compete with, there's a lot of very, very good companies in the space doing similar things to what we do, like Epsilon and Axiom that are much better known brands and multi-million dollar companies. We're kind of the little guy that is really focused on a niche part of the business. And so most of our business, James, comes from referrals, word of mouth. So we have targeted a couple different sectors. I talked about tourism. We do a number of conferences within our industry. So most of the U.S. states have what they call governors conferences for tourism. And so throughout the year, we're a presence in those because we have so many clients, either state tourism clients or what we call destination marketing organizations. So convention and visitors bureaus, things of that nature. So we have a very high presence at those. Either I'm speaking at those or we have attendees from our organization that are part of that. And then we're fortunate enough that we get a lot of wonderful referrals where, networking is a big part of that. And then we do outreach. We have a regular cadence of communication that we send out to folks talking more about the application of data, right? Giving them examples. I think that we find that case studies, especially for the small to mid-sized clients that we work with, are the most powerful tool that we have. So an entity might think, hey, I'm too small. My budget's not big enough. I don't have a formalized CRM. I can't afford to do, $5 million of media. So I'm not going to do anything. Well, I think that's actually pretty far from the truth. Yes, budget is a factor, but there's a lot of effective things that you can do even on limited budgets. And so we've built a wonderful reputation of being able to work with the smaller entities to get the biggest advantage for them with whatever their budget availability is, and deploying techniques and channels that, again, it's all about driving a positive ROI. So whether you have $100,000 to spend or $1 million to spend, we still need to drive a positive ROI. And so that's where our focus has been at its height.
It's quite clear your mission as a company, providing clear ROI for the clients that you work with. And you're doing well in the events and the referrals, etc. And you said you've done some outreach as well. So these are the things that have been working for you. So I'm interested to know, because agency life isn't all bells and whistles, and it can have its challenges. So where do you feel like the most pressure in your business right now? What is a big challenge or bottleneck for your company at the moment?
Well, as a small business owner, I know you can appreciate this. Typically, cash flow is always the most critical item. And so, you want to make sure that you constantly have a pipeline that's full of new business opportunities. Plus, the clients that you're working with currently are just not one-off projects that you do and then don't have another opportunity to work with that client. So what's critical for us is making sure that our account service team surrounds our clients and really understands what the challenges are. And we want to be successful. The clients want to be successful. We want to be successful with our engagement, such that at the end of that, the client says, boy, that went really well. Let's look at phase 2, or let's look at expanding that project. And so it becomes an add-on with another opportunity that follows behind it. So we very much want to make sure that we are meeting, if not consistently exceeding, client expectations. I would tell you the single biggest challenge for us is, as a relatively small business of only 15 people, awareness is always the biggest issue for us. My business partner, who retired in 2023, who was one of the original founders of RMG back in 1986, he always used to say that you can't choose something that you don't know exists. And so no matter how great our work is, when you're small, part of the problem is I can send out all the emails I want, but I'm sure you, like every other person on my email list, gets somewhere between 50 and 100 or more emails every day. So how do you, as a recipient of an email from RMG, understand who we are, what we're all about? Why should I click and open on that? And do I even need your services at this point? So we're constantly trying to refine our messaging, making sure that what we're saying in the marketplace is relevant for our audience. That's why I alluded earlier, we really kind of hang our hat on case studies. I'm a paid spokesperson. I'm the sales guy. I'm supposed to generate the opportunities. So if you don't want to believe me, believe our case studies, believe the quotes from our clients. Feel free to reach out and talk to any of them. But I think, to your question, it's cutting through the clutter of email that our clients get and recognizing that probably, again, we almost all use these devices now, right? And so it's the first filter. And so you see emails all day long and you're swiping, nope, 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 right? Delete it and away it goes. So we want to make sure that what we're saying piques your interest enough that you're not going to dismiss it outright. You may come back to it later. And then hopefully by building relevance in a consistent, ongoing way, we have an opportunity to engage at some point. We're not going to be right for everybody. I understand that. It's getting through and finding the ways, whether that's a mix of conferences, whether that's a mix of speaking opportunities, whether that's our email campaigns, whether that's continuing to use LinkedIn and other digital platforms to promote the success that we're having and the type of clients that we're working with. But keeping that pipeline full, going back to cash flow, right, is a critical issue for small businesses. I'm fortunate to say in 40 years the company has never had any debt. We don't have a line of credit. We've been able to sustain ourselves from the great client relationships that we have, and we hope that'll continue.
Yeah, and 40 years is testament, and to not have debt as well, that's a real good achievement. A lot of businesses rely on that line of credit to be able to keep themselves going from a cash flow perspective. So what I'm getting from you, Jim, is that you're very much the sales guy, the leader, the guy that's kind of like spearheading the company. So does the company heavily rely on your kind of oversight? And also, if you stepped away from the kind of sales process, would business slow down for the company?
Well, one of the things I will fully confess, James, is that I've been a sales guy basically my entire career. So I started not with RMG in my first job out of college, but I did start in sales. And so I guess I am for good or for bad, I'm the designated rainmaker. And for a number of years, especially kind of pre-COVID and then within the COVID years, I was really afraid of making an investment in sales on the team just because I've lived through a couple downturns from an economic perspective. And the thing that hurts me personally the most is when you have to let someone go, whether that's because of economic conditions and, external factors that are well beyond our control and can't continue to retain that person. That's painful. But on the other side, it's things that you can control and you just do your best. So one of the things I was reluctant to do was make a significant investment, recognizing that in a small business, if you pay somebody $100,000 as a salesperson and they're not generating at least 2x or 3x that in revenue, then that's taking away from other investments that you could make from a CapEx perspective across the organization. I changed my thinking at really the end of 23 and then 24. We've been very fortunate with about 25 to 30% annual growth over the last 3 years. And so I decided that we were going to make some investments in bringing on additional salespeople. So we've added both an internal outbound, I'll call them not a call center by any stretch of the imagination, but an individual who is doing good old fashioned outbound calling off of our success of our email campaigns. So where we're tracking opens and clicks and engagements and requests for consultations, we've got a very traditional outbound calling strategy. And then we've augmented with kind of additional feet on the street from a sales perspective that are giving us the chance to get at more of a granular level and see more folks as opposed to just doing that in 3 days at a conference.
So you said something there that stood out. You said that you got feet on the ground. So does a lot of your work and the clients that you're working with, are they local, or do you actually expand your client base wider than just a local city or state?
Well, again, for good or for bad, one of the things that COVID brought for all of us was the expansion of what you and I are doing right now, right? Zooms, Meets, Teams, whatever platform you like the best. Not to sound like the fuddy-duddy old guy, in the 90s and the early 2000s, sales for me was face to face, right? We sat across the table from each other if we had a cup of coffee or we had lunch. I felt like that was building a great relationship that ended up being very long lasting for RMG. I still prefer that, but in reality, you can't do that. And so we have focused on being what I would say a predominantly Southeast US focused company. So we have a lot of clients that are in Virginia, North and South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. Those are easy for our team. They're all on the same time zone, so our staff can support the projects that we're working on. That said, we do have clients in Arizona. We do have clients in Colorado. So it's not that we don't want to work with clients outside of the Southeast. It's just been those have been very easy for us to support. And I still do like to have a personal presence with our clients. I do like to see them at least once a year. So even those on the West Coast, I will make a commitment to go out and try to spend a day or two with those clients, whether that's going through reporting analysis on the back end of campaigns so that we can assess the success and talk about next steps, whether that's midway through the process. We have clients all over the country, but the dominant percentage in the Southeast. So we do have an opportunity to see those folks.
I think that's an untapped gem, really, Jim, that you've highlighted, and touching base with your clients, because I think, well, we can get lazy, can't we? We can spread the net wide, try and get as many clients as we can, but actually having that personal touch actually makes the kind of relationship more human. And it's something that I've employed within my businesses as well. Having at least one annual touch point where you go and see them, you get a feel for how the partnership is working, what's working well, what could be improved. So then next year you can actually go into that year and look to see how you can grow. And I think that's the core basis of retention and growth with a client. I think if you can grow and retain clients, that's probably why you've been in business for 40 years, because of that touch point. Would I be right in saying that?
I think so. I think, it's um, I'm not saying our goal is to know every tidbit about our clients. When I was young in the sales process, one of the things that I was taught was it's always good to know as much about the client as you possibly can. Some people are more forthcoming with others. Some will share with you, for example, I've got 3 kids and here's how old they are. And this is my wife's name and I love to play golf and whatever. That's all great. It's nice to know that. And I think that allows you to build a stronger relationship. And we all appreciate when you have a conversation with somebody, the person that you're talking to says, "Hey, how's Amy? She were getting ready to go to college. What's on her short list?" That type of thing. I think when you can build that relationship and rapport, there is a bonding there. And it demonstrates that we're not in this in a transactional relationship. We're in this to make sure that both sides have fully invested a lot of both time, energy, and emotion in making sure that the campaigns are successful. If they're not successful, it's not for me to say, "Well, we did our best. We wish you the best of luck." And I don't want to have to go to a client and have that conversation. We have had some campaigns that have underperformed, and either we'll own that, the clients will own that, or we mutually own that and say, "Hey, we need to figure out how to do better in our next campaign." But the fact that the client understands we're fully invested in that outcome as much as they are, it's not a transactional relationship. I think is, to your point, what has allowed us to be so successful over these 40 years.
I love it. So let's move into AI, and I'm interested to understand with the evolving nature of your business. And I haven't spoken to many agencies that are 40 years into their journey. So the last 2 or 3 years must have been a big shift for you, really. How are you using AI internally? Are you using AI?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. I will say this. I have not been here for all of our 40 years. I started in 1994, so I've been here for quite a few. And I did leave for a while, and I came back a second time. But when I was first at RMG, we'll take 1994. There was, and still are, buzzwords in the analytics business, as you well know, in the data business, right? And so for years and years, we talked about big data, right? And everybody's like, "Oh, what does big data mean?" And fast forward to today. Now we're at AI. At the end of the day, the commonality of all of that is still that four-letter word data, right? And so for us, the way we see the application of AI for our business is really nothing different from when we were building clone models and lookalike models back in the late 80s and early 90s. The difference is for us to build that model, ingest all the data, overlay it, report it back to the client was a 7-day process. Today, it's about a 7-minute process. And that's the difference in AI, right? The ability to be able to say, we have large data sets that we can now process at speed and at scale. And so where I have a geo frame that's running and might capture 1.2 million in-person visitors, I now can process that data. I can build all kinds of different segmentation strategies out of that data utilizing AI that would have taken my analysts 3, 4, 5 days to be able to build in the past. So for us, AI, that's one component as data practitioners that has been a complete game changer for us. So speed to market, speed to project, the ability to manipulate and analyze data at scale is dramatically different. And I think that will only exponentially increase going forward. Now, I don't know that we'll get less than 7 minutes to analyze that data versus the 7 days from before. I think the other thing that's very different, and I think this is what scares our clients, James, to be quite honest, is now, you see this preponderance of using AI driven creative to develop a lot of the campaigns. I think while to me, it's shocking how good they are. they still don't have always the soul in the creative that a copywriter and an art director can put into campaigns. So I think we in the industry just need to be careful when we're adopting AI driven creative as to, does that speak to me, or is it simply taking kind of a best of, and I'm creating this kind of look-alike in terms of the actual visage of someone, right? And so the upside of that, so you're walking on a double-edged sword. The other side of that is, whereas small clients that we would have had in the past that couldn't afford to have an agency now can do all of that in-house. So in a matter of a day, I can craft a video, I can craft a banner campaign, I can craft an email using the assets that I have plus those that are available using AI, and I don't need to pay agency retainers and fees, which if I was an agency would scare the heck out of me today, right? And of course, that they will find their own practical applications and have found their own practical applications for AI. But what I think it does change is that, now from our little desktop right here, we all consider ourselves, we're creative geniuses, right? And so I think that's the dangerous side of the tool. But for us, back to your original question, it has allowed us to do things at a speed and a scale that who could have possibly envisioned that 20 years ago?
It's insane how fast it's moving, and I like the fact that you've taken the bull by the horns with this, and you're really adopting it within your agency, especially on the data and analytics side, which is your core offering. The podcast is called the Sheer Growth Podcast because we are bringing in leaders onto the episode to really talk about their vision for the future. And as we are into 2026 now, what does a breakthrough 2026 look like for RMG?
Well, we are very much focused on growth. So, to kind of underscore your podcast's name, title, and mission, we're right there with you. I think one of the things we want to understand is, how can we grow two channels for the company? The first, which I think that if we split our client mix and our revenue generation strategies, we see the ability to have a little bit of a true SaaS-based model where we're offering services to clients that are self-serve. They're smaller to mid-size. They don't need a huge agency partner. They want to be able to deploy analytic capabilities. They want to be able to pull reports on their own. So if I can offer them software as a service, a model where they have a password protection, 24/7 access into data, we're deploying analytics for them. They can report on that, share that with their board, and they can make tweaks on the margin. We see that as generating 50% of our revenue in 2026 and beyond. The other side of that, we would put in the managed services bucket, where we have a client that's, I'm going to say needy, and I don't mean that in a negative connotation. It's somebody that wants to do more ad hoc reporting. They want to do what if scenarios. They want to look at a lot of test and learn, crawl, walk, run type strategies. And so they want us to hold their hand and go down that road with them together, as opposed to, I'm not going to do this by myself. It's not just a DIY. I need a strategy partner. I need an execution partner. I need an analytics partner. And so we want to see the other 50% of our revenue coming from that managed services channel. And it could be in the same industries. So it could be financial services. It could be tourism. It could be healthcare. Um, we are agnostic in that, and we feel like we've got great expertise in some of those industries that we want to align with those types of clients. So that's our focus, and fully leveraging, going all in on. We talked about, we now have an in-house calling strategy. We have feet on the street, so we want to really kind of double down on using those folks as well.
I love the goals. It's really enlightening, especially having so much energy after. I know you've not been there 40 years, but a 40-year business that's still going, and you're spearheading the company. So, Jim, it's been an absolute pleasure. Where can people find out about you and your company?
Yeah, great. Thank you, James. So our website's the first place to start, which is www.rmg, as in Robert Mary George, rmg-usa.com. We have a web page, a YouTube page. So once you're on YouTube, if you just look up either Response Marketing Group or RMG USA, you will see a collection of both internally produced videos where we talk about what we do with data and analytics. You'll see interviews with our clients. You'll see other podcasts that we've done. So depending upon what your level of interest is, based on an industry or a particular focus, you should be able to find some form of information on YouTube or on our website.